What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today, we're going to be continuing our god roll guides for y'all with this bad boy, a new heavy burst, so that 2-round burst pulse rifle, the Corrasion. This is one of a few heavy bursts that we have in the game, besides the exotic revision 0, so we're going to cover the god rolls for both of the PvE, PvP realm, as well as the origin trait right here with that Radiolarian Transposer. So when we get those rapid final blows, causes targets to explode into a pool of Radiolarian fluid, which is acting almost like a little arc grenade that drops down, causes them to like jolt each other for a second, but it's really not that cool of a perk overall, but it does feel a lot better on something like this pulse rifle instead of something like when we have it on our rockets, stuff like that. So starting us off in the PvE realm, I think that this thing is very, very stable for a 2-round burst and a pulse rifle in general. So I personally went with range on this bad boy so we can really reach out and hit those enemies in the PvE realm far away. It's at 92 with this thing at that level 20 and having it as our masterwork. As for our barrel right here, I went with that stability as well as range. So stability is at 46, range is at 92. Like I said, that smaller bore gives us +7 in each of those categories, so this is what I personally went with. You could switch it out for something like Hammer Forged if you wanted, give yourself a little bit more range, cranking it up to 95, but I really do think small bore, for me at least, felt the best. Magazine, we got 2 options for y'all. The first one right here, which is what I would go with, is the tactical mag. We get our increase in stability, reload, as well as magazine size. So with this, we got that 20 in the magazine with the stats that I was talking about before, with 92 in range, 46 in that stability. Your other option you could go with is the appended mag. It gives you only 2 more shots, so only 1 single more burst in this gun at 22 in the magazine, drops our stability down to 41, so it's nothing too crazy in my opinion to have this appended mag versus the tactical mag on this one, but you do get that 1 extra burst, so totally up to you. I just like tactical a little bit more. Now when we move on to our third column, got a couple options right here for the PvE realm. First off, eddy current, temporarily increase reload speed and handling after sprinting or while amplified. We become amplified pretty easy inside of Destiny, no matter if you're prismatic or the arc subclass. Increase reload handling, have longer duration. This effect significantly is improved when we are amplified, so definitely trying to play into the amplification side of builds no matter what you're using, whether it be that prismatic or your arc subclass for eddy current, but it does feel very good in my opinion, especially with that reload speed with this 2-round burst. Definitely what it was struggling with out of its stats compared to other pulse rifles. The second option is high impact reserves. Rounds at the end of the magazine deal more damage. Improved damage starts earlier in the magazine with this enhanced version, so nice little even more damage to this thing because already a little bit higher in its damage side because of the 2-round burst, so just juicing it even more. Definitely like this perk, but my personal opinion, like eddy current more. Third option and last option in the third column here, we got Pugilist, so final blows with the weapon generate ourselves some improved melee energy. Dealing melee damage improves the weapon's handling, so also not a bad option for PvP, but I do like it to give us back our melee energy because most melees inside of Destiny are pretty juicy, so not a bad thing to have just in general. Like Demolitionist gives us our grenade, this gives us back our melee. Good thing to have in the PvE realm. Now first option for me, we got a couple good juicers right here in the fourth column. I'm going to give us about 4 of them. So first off, we got the Jolt in Volt Shot. This thing is pretty good in my opinion, especially since it is that heavy burst. We're getting defeats pretty easily even in that endgame content with this thing, so we're able to get that Volt Shot to proc, and then we can jolt targets, create a bunch of things. This will help us to get that amplification as well for eddy current, so my personal opinion, Volt Shot with eddy current is the 5 out of 5. Second option for y'all is Frenzy. Gives us that nice overall 15% damage boost, very good for basically any type of content you're going into. Plus we get that handling and reload speed, which like I said earlier, our reload speed is a little bit lower than some of our other pulse rifles just because of that heavy burst. So Frenzy, very good option as well, but Volt Shot definitely number 1. Pretty good staple inside of the PvE column is the 1 for all trait here. So hitting 3 separate targets gives us a damage increase for an improved duration. Definitely good in some of that endgame content, or when you're getting swarmed with ads, stuff like those Echo Battlegrounds or going into some Onslaught, since we got that nice little thing from our boy Zavala where we can actually attune to those weapons. So definitely more for when there's a lot of ads going on, but once you get it procced, definitely a good damage increase. Kind of the same thing right here. If you pair this Focus Fury with the high impact reserves, you are doing some pretty juicy damage at the end of that magazine. So dealing half of the magazine as precision damage grants us bonus weapon damage for an improved duration. So very, very nice in my opinion with this Focus Fury, but it is a more DPS thing. Like I said, if you're using it specifically for champions or something like that, throw this bad boy on. But that Eddy Current Volt Shot is definitely the 5 out of 5 go in my personal opinion, no matter what kind of content you're going into. So like the 2-round burst heavy pulse rifles that we're getting, especially since we're getting a couple different legendary versions instead of just that revision 0. So personally, I really like this thing. I'm gonna give it probably a 4.5, 4.6 out of 5. I was taking it through that GM, felt very, very good in my personal opinion. So totally up to your gameplay style, but y'all let me know what you think of it in the PvE realm. But we're gonna get into that PvP side as well, because it does melt pretty hard in that aspect as well. So like I'm saying, this thing absolutely slaps in PvP realm too. I got a reran in a survival in a comp match, so this thing was absolutely disgusting. Love the heavy burst side of the Crucible with it, so I went with range again because we're gonna have 100 range on this bad boy with the 46 instability. So this thing absolutely beams people in the Crucible. As for barrel, again, I personally went with small bore. You could change it out for something like Corkscrew if you wanted for a little bit more stability, but that range stability at +7 with this small bore gives us that juicy 100 in range with 46 in stability. So this thing absolutely maps Guardians. As for magazine right here, going with accurized rounds gives us that 100 in the range that I was talking about. Steady rounds juices our stability all the way up to like 61, but our range drops all the way down to like 86. So personally, like accurized more than steady rounds, but if you're having trouble controlling the weapon, maybe go with steady rounds over accurized. Third column, we got a couple different options for you guys, but I really think there's only 2 that feel the best in my personal opinion. So first off, we got that perpetual motion. This is what I would go with. We get stability, handling, and reload while we're in motion, and it's very easy to get ×2 to proc, at least for me. My gameplay, I'm always moving around, sliding around, so personally, perpetual feels the best in Crucible because it gives us those juicers in stability, handling, and reload, which it's a little slacking, like I said, in reload before, just in PvE realm, so this helps definitely in PvP as well. Second option, which I think is definitely a sleeper for a lot of people, is Enlightened Action. Dealing that damage gives us improved reload and handling on this bad boy, so handling, never a bad thing in the Crucible, being able to switch on and off your weapons a little bit faster, and then like I've been talking about with this bad boy, since it's the 2-round burst, reload speed kind of taking a hit, so having that increase in reload makes it feel way better with just continually putting down that fire instead of having to reload and then the enemy has time to heal a little bit. So a lightened action, definitely a good second choice in my opinion. My last option right here is high impact reserves. We do got that perfect float and air assault, but for me doesn't feel nearly as good on a pulse rifle compared to something like a hand cannon with those. So just sticking with high impact reserves as our last one, so we can really do some crazy damage on those last couple shots of the magazine. It's probably the last 3 bursts when you're using it in Crucible. For me, I personally reload a little too often to get this to proc as often as it should, but if you always let your weapon run out of ammo and reload that way, then high impacts is definitely a good perk to go with. But personally, like I said, perpetual is my #1 option. Fourth column, got a couple options for you again. We got the Eye of the Storm as my first option. We become more accurate and boost handling as our health gets lower, plus we get a little bump in our stability. So I like having this bad boy. Again, feels a little bit better in something like a hand cannon, but I also don't mind it here on this pulse since it is that 2-round burst. I do feel like it's a 3-round kind of shot anyways, like a hand cannon, so totally a personal preference, but Eye of the Storm would be my #1 option. Second option is that Frenzy. We get that nice base damage across the board with plus 15%, plus we get handling and reload, so not too shabby in my opinion for the Crucible, especially with handling and reload on top of the damage boost that we're getting, so I think it's a sleeper. Totally up to you if you want that Eye of the Storm or Frenzy. I think they're basically interchangeable in that fourth column here. Last option, which I just personally don't like this perk that much, but maybe I'm just using it wrong, but Final Blows with this weapon grants stacks of bonus damage. Attacking targets from higher ground immediately grants the maximum stacks of that damage, so we also get a little bit of increase to reload speed. Nothing too crazy about this, but your feet do have to be on the ground for this to proc, so being able to float with a Warlock or even just jumping around and using it, not proccing high ground as much as it should, so that's why I like the Storm or Frenzy a little bit better in this column. But if you like high ground, some people really do, so you could go with it as well. But overall, this thing in the Crucible, I do really like it compared to some of our other pulse rifles that we've got as of recently, so I'm gonna give it probably a 4.4 out of 5. Absolutely, it juices some of those Guardians, so really like this thing. Definitely would suggest crafting it as soon as you can. That heavy round of burst for these pulse rifles is becoming very much one of my favorite archetypes, especially since the only thing that we had before this was that exotic revision 0, so not having to waste an exotic slot also makes it feel pretty nice. So appreciate you guys again for coming back to the channel. Means a lot to me, means a lot to the channel. Helps out as well if you like and subscribe to the video, as well as smack that bell so you know you get the notifications on any of these builds, God roll guides that we put out for you. So once again, appreciate all you guys for coming back. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.